Folktale, young Zina discovers she can speak to whales, an ancient gift linked to a deep secret beneath the sea. As ancient memories awaken and seals guarding forgotten powers begin to break, Zina must choose, restore balance or let the deep consume all. Perfect for bedtime stories, African mythology lovers, and inspirational storytelling fans. Like, comment, subscribe for more African folktales, wisdom tales, and magical stories from the heart of the continent. The village of Okun-Maji stood at the edge of the world, where the ocean kissed the earth with roaring affection and the sky stretched endlessly above. It was a land of stories passed through drums and firelight, where fishermen told tales of sea spirits and children played with shells that still echoed with songs from the deep. Among them lived a quiet girl with eyes as wide as the moon and hair like tangled seaweed, called Zina, though some whispered she had no true name, only a sound the sea had gifted her. Zina was unlike any other child in the village. Found cradled in a giant clamshell on the shore after a fierce storm, she was raised by Mama Olamide, the village midwife and keeper of old songs. The villagers, both awed and afraid, kept their distance. Zina rarely spoke, but she often wandered barefoot to the shoreline, humming strange tunes that seemed to ripple across the waves. Seagulls gathered when she sang, and dolphins leapt in time to her melody. It wasn't until the whales came that the village began to fear her. Giant, majestic creatures, they had not visited Okun-Maji in generations. But now, they appeared regularly, only when Zina was near. Though no one said it out loud, some believed Zina was a child of the water spirits, and Obiku come to lure their sons into the sea. Others thought her a blessing from the goddess Umoja, a link between their people and the depths. Only Mama Olamide loved her without fear, tending to her quietly and teaching her old chants believed to calm stormy tides. But the ocean had begun to stir. The arrival of the whales was only the first whisper of a deeper calling. At dawn, the village of Okun-Maji woke to the sound of drums, not from celebration, but alarm. Fishermen raced from the shore, pointing toward the horizon where something vast and dark moved just beneath the waves. At first, the people thought it was a storm cloud rising from the ocean. But as the mist lifted, they saw the towering fin and smooth, glistening back of a great whale. It was unlike any they had ever seen. Its skin shimmered like obsidian, and its eyes, when it surfaced, gleamed with a strange intelligence. The creature lingered close to the shore, circling slowly, as if searching for something. The elders gathered beneath the talking tree to consult the ancient drums. Their faces were grim. Whales were sacred in Okun-Maji lore, messengers of the deep, protectors of balance. Their sudden appearance was never random. It was a sign. The oldest among them, Baba Kweku, recalled stories his grandfather had once told of a girl who would speak to whales when the sea was ready to speak back. Zina stood barefoot on the sand, her dress fluttering in the sea breeze, watching the creature with calm eyes. While others cowered or stared in wonder, she raised her arms and began to hum. The sound was soft, barely above the wind, but it carried across the water. The whale stilled. Then, to the horror of the crowd, it swam closer, so close its massive body nearly touched the rocks. It dipped its head once, then disappeared into the waves, leaving behind only ripples and stunned silence. Mama Olamide stepped forward and pulled Zina close, her face pale. "Child," she whispered, "what have you done?" Zina, eyes still on the sea, simply replied, "He was calling me." That night, the village of Okun-Maji sat in uneasy quiet. Even the usual chorus of crickets and waves seemed muted, as if the world was holding its breath. Around the central fire, the elders debated what to do. Some insisted Zina should be taken to the shrine for purification, others believed she should be left at sea to return to whatever brought her. Only Mama Olamide defended her, reminding them of the balance the sea required and what happened the last time they ignored its signs. In her small hut near the edge of the cliffs, Zina could not sleep. The sea called to her in rhythms older than words, a soft pulsing in her chest that matched the beat of waves against rock. She sat by the window, staring at the moonlit water. Her fingers traced symbols into the wooden sill, markings she didn't understand but felt compelled to draw. They looked like waves and eyes, like spirals and mouths mid-song. As midnight crept closer, a distant sound reached her ears. Low and haunting, like a choir of giants humming beneath the sea. Her heart quickened. She stepped outside and followed the sound down to the beach, the wind teasing her hair like invisible fingers. The sky above glittered with stars, and out at sea, faint lights blinked, bioluminescence dancing in the tide. And then she saw them. A pod of whales, at least 7, swimming just off the shore. They moved in slow, synchronized circles, their songs rising like incense into the night sky. Zina stood at the water's edge, overwhelmed by emotion. Without realizing it, she began to hum in return. Her voice wove itself into theirs, forming a harmony that vibrated in the sand beneath her feet. Zina was curled up on the wet sand, fast asleep, her dress soaked and clinging to her skin. The tide had risen dangerously high during the night, but it had stopped just short of her body, as though the sea itself had protected her. When Mama Olamide reached her, she let out a gasp, not from fear, but awe. Etched into Zina's back, glowing faintly like morning dew, was a symbol no one had seen in generations, the mark of the sea whisperer, a spiral encircled by wave-like lines. It was a sacred symbol, once spoken of in hushed tones and half-remembered songs. In the days of their ancestors, the sea whisperer was a bridge between land and ocean, chosen by the spirits to restore harmony when either realm fell into imbalance. But those were just tales, or so they had thought. As word spread, villagers gathered in murmuring clusters. Some knelt in reverence, others backed away in fear. Baba Kweku stepped forward to examine the mark, his wrinkled hands trembling. "It has returned," he whispered. "The sea has chosen." Zina opened her eyes slowly, blinking at the crowd. She didn't speak. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a smooth, spiral-shaped stone, a gift from the well in her dreams. It paused gently in her hand, warm and alive. That evening, a storm began brewing on the distant horizon. The sky darkened, and seabirds flew inland in frantic patterns. The elders took it as an omen. Something was coming. Something old. Something powerful. And at the center of it all stood Zina, the girl once believed to be an orphan, now revealed to be the key to a destiny none of them truly understood. Thunder roared across the sky like 1,000 drums as the storm approached Okun-Maji. By nightfall, the winds howled through the palm trees, and waves crashed angrily against the shore. The fishermen pulled their boats inland, tying them tightly while chanting prayers to the sea goddess Umoja. Lightning split the sky in jagged flashes, illuminating the village in bursts of blue and silver. Zina stood beneath the thatched eaves of Mama Olamide's hut, her eyes fixed on the ocean. The stone in her hand pulsed faster now, as if in warning. She felt no fear, only a strange urgency rising in her chest, like a voice she couldn't yet understand trying to break free. Mama Olamide placed a protective charm around her neck, murmuring blessings. "Whatever this storm brings," she said softly, "you must stay close. The sea gives, but it also takes." But the sea wasn't the only thing that had arrived with the storm. As the rain poured in thick sheets, a figure stumbled into the village from the cliffs. Drenched, bleeding, and barely conscious, he collapsed near the fire pit. The villagers rushed to him, wary but curious. He was no one they recognized, tall, dark-skinned, dressed in faded traveling robes, and clutching a strange carved pendant that shimmered like coral. On his wrist was the same spiral symbol as Zina's, burned into his skin. Zina stepped forward before anyone else could. Her eyes locked with his, and a sharp wind blew through the village, momentarily silencing the storm. He opened his mouth and spoke just 3 words before fainting. "The deep is rising." The elders stared at each other in alarm. The ocean's whisper had now become a voice. The stranger lay unconscious for 2 days in the healer's hut, his body racked with fever and seawater still clinging to his hair. The village buzzed with questions. Who was he? How did he bear the same mark as Zina? And what did his warning mean, "The deep is rising"? Zina visited him daily, drawn to him by something she couldn't name. When she held the coral pendant he had clutched, it vibrated softly, sending images into her mind, glimpses of sunken temples, glowing sea beasts, and a great eye watching from the ocean's floor. She gasped and dropped it. The connection was real and dangerous. Mama Olamide watched the girl with quiet concern. She recognized the pendant's design from an old tale. It was said to belong to the keepers of the deep, a lost brotherhood who once communed with the sea's ancient spirits. They were believed to be long gone, swallowed by the ocean centuries ago. On the 3rd night, the stranger finally awoke. His name was Molio, a voyager from the distant archipelago of Nguvawanda, a place swallowed by the sea after the whales vanished. He had been guided to Okun-Maji by dreams, visions of a girl with sea glass eyes, singing to the waves. "You're the echo," he told Zina. "The one they've been waiting for." Zina didn't understand. But the whales returned that night, more than ever before. They circled the bay, singing loudly, their voices no longer mournful but filled with tension. "The ocean is stirring," Malio said, sitting up weakly. "And something beneath it is waking." The villagers, once dismissive of legends, now looked to Zina with new eyes, not as a cursed girl, but as their only chance of survival. Under the flickering light of oil lamps, Malio sat before the village elders, wrapped in warm cloth and sipping from a calabash of spicy broth. His voice, though still weak, held the weight of truth. Zina sat beside him, her eyes wide, absorbing every word. "In the old world," he began, "before men cut down sacred trees and poisoned the rivers, there was a temple beneath the sea. It was not built by hands, but grown from coral, bone, and salt. The keepers of the deep were chosen to guard it, to interpret the dreams of the whales and keep balance between land and water." The villagers listened, rapt. Baba Kweku frowned deeply, clearly remembering scraps of the same tale from his youth. "But the temple was betrayed," Malio continued, "by those who sought to control the ocean's magic. They silenced the whales, buried the temple beneath storms, and scattered the keepers. My people were among them. I'm one of the last. And now the ocean calls again, not in peace, but in warning." He looked at Zina. "You have the echo. You are not just a whisperer. You are the key." Zina opened her palm to reveal the spiral stone, now glowing with a pale light. When she held it near Malio's pendant, the two shimmered in unison, casting moving shadows on the walls, images of whales circling an underwater doorway. "The temple still exists," Malio whispered. "And something inside it wants to rise." Silence settled over the room like thick mist. Baba Kweku stood slowly. "If this is true, the girl must begin the rite of knowing, before the sea takes back what is hers." The fire crackled. Zina swallowed hard. Her journey was about to begin. The sun had barely risen when the village drummers began to beat a slow, reverent rhythm. All of Okun-Maji gathered near the sacred pool behind the old shrine, a place where fresh spring water mixed with salt from underground channels, believed to be touched by Umoja herself. Only a few had ever been chosen to step into its depths. Today, it was Zina's turn. She stood at the edge of the water, dressed in a white wrap, a crown of dried seaweed resting lightly on her head. Her spiral stone hung from a cord around her neck, pulsing faintly. Beside her stood Baba Kweku, his staff carved with wave patterns and ancestral glyphs. "The rite of knowing," he intoned, "is not a test of power, but of truth. You must enter the sacred pool and face what lies within your spirit. Only then will the ocean reveal your path." The crowd watched silently as Zina stepped into the cool, crystal-clear water. It embraced her gently, tugging at her feet as if recognizing her. With each step deeper, the hum of whale song echoed faintly in her ears, though no one else seemed to hear it. When she was submerged up to her shoulders, she took a deep breath and let herself sink beneath the surface. In the silence of the pool's depths, time seemed to shift. The water glowed softly, illuminating carvings on the stones beneath, symbols she had seen in dreams. A figure emerged from the shadows, a woman made of water and light, as deep as the sea. "You carry the voice of the old ones," she said. "But you do not yet know who you are." Zina tried to speak, but her words turned to bubbles. "Follow the whales," the spirit whispered. "They will lead you to the heart." And then, all went dark. Zina emerged from the sacred pool gasping for air, her eyes wide with the shimmer of something seen far beyond the veil of the ordinary. The villagers gasped. A ring of glowing symbols now circled her forehead, trailing light like droplets of moon-kissed water. The spiral stone around her neck was warm, no longer just an object, but a part of her. Mama Olamide wrapped a cloak around her shoulders and guided her to a seat near the fire. "What did you see, child?" she asked gently, brushing damp curls from Zina's forehead. The girl sat still for a long moment before answering. "A temple beneath the sea. Alive. Breathing. And a door that must not be opened," Zina whispered, shivering. "But the whales are afraid. They are circling it, guarding it." Malio's face turned grave. "Then it's true. The seal is weakening. That temple holds something ancient. Not all that sleeps should wake." The elders murmured among themselves. Baba Kweku turned to Zina. "You've been shown what few have seen. Your gift is real. But you cannot face this path alone." That night, as Zina lay in Mama Olamide's hut, she dreamed again, but this time, the vision was sharper. She stood upon a massive whale's back, riding across a stormy ocean. The stars above spun in strange constellations, and a voice beneath the waves cried out her name. "Zina, the gate is opening." She awoke with a jolt. Outside, the wind had picked up again. Far in the distance, the whales began to sing, louder than before and more desperate. The sea was stirring, and something buried in its belly was starting to rise. At sunrise, Zina stood atop the cliffs overlooking the restless ocean. The sky was painted in streaks of gold and crimson, but the air held a strange tension. The whales were visible even from this height, their massive forms circling the bay like silent sentinels. Their song paused in her chest, not just music, but direction. "They are showing me the way," she whispered to Mama Olamide, who stood beside her. "To the heart of the sea." Mama Olamide placed a firm hand on her shoulder. "Then you must follow. But know this, Zina, you go not just as a child of Okun-Maji, but as the voice of something ancient. The ocean listens to you. You must listen back. Preparations began that morning. The villagers, once faithful, now gathered in support. They brought food, charms, a carved staff for protection, and a small canoe blessed by the elders. Molio would accompany her. Though still recovering, he insisted. "We are bound to the same calling," he told her. "What lies beneath is not just a secret, it is a danger. And if we do nothing, the tide will drown the world." Before leaving, Zina knelt at the water's edge, whispering a prayer to Yamoja. The ocean responded with a soft wave that kissed her toes, an answer, or perhaps a warning. By midday, they set off, paddling beyond the reef and into deeper waters. The whales followed, flanking them in quiet formation like ancient guardians. The village faded into the mist behind them. Zina felt a strange calm settle over her. She was no longer just a girl from a forgotten village. She was the bearer of the echo. And the sea had begun to speak. The canoe rocked gently as Zina and Molio drifted farther from the coast. The air thickened with salt, and the color of the water deepened from green to an endless sapphire blue. The sounds of the village faded until there was nothing but the rhythmic splash of paddles, the low murmur of whale song, and the occasional whisper of wind. The further they traveled, the more the world seemed to shift. Time felt slower, heavier. Zina sat quietly, her hand gripping the spiral stone around her neck. She could feel it vibrating in short pulses, like a heartbeat guiding her deeper into the unknown. The whales glided beside them, massive and serene, their black and silver backs reflecting the midday sun. One of them, the largest, occasionally surfaced near Zina, its eye locking with hers in a gaze that felt older than the ocean itself. "Do they ever speak in words?" she asked Molio, her voice barely above a whisper. "No," he replied, eyes fixed on the horizon. "But they don't need to. They speak in memory, in emotion, in tides and time." They camped at night on a small sandbar that rose like a quiet hush in the middle of the sea. Molio built a fire using driftwood and herbs from his pouch. The flames danced in blues and greens, casting strange shadows. As they ate dried fish and shared silence, Molio turned to her. "The temple is close. I can feel it. It's hidden beneath the folds of the sea, between currents where no boat dares to sail." Zina nodded. Her dreams had already shown her glimpses of what waited. But dreams could not prepare her for the truth. Beneath them, in the deep, something stirred. Watching. Waiting. The moon hung full and bright above the ocean, casting a silvery path across the waves. Zina lay awake on the sandbar, staring at the stars, listening to the whales hum beneath the water. The melody had changed, softer now, more urgent. It pulled at her soul like a thread unraveling from the fabric of the world. "Do you hear it?" she asked. Molio, already sitting near the water with his pendant glowing faintly, nodded. "They are guiding us. Tonight is the turning." Without another word, they stepped into the canoe and pushed off. The whales surrounded them once again, forming a slow-moving ring as the canoe drifted toward an invisible point. The ocean below was eerily still, reflecting the stars like a mirror. Then suddenly, the sea began to part, not with violence, but with grace. A wide, circular opening appeared, as though the water itself had chosen to reveal a hidden world. Beneath the surface, glowing coral structures spiraled downward like a submerged city of glass and bone. Strange fish with translucent fins darted through the pillars, and vines of seaweed shimmered like strands of starlight. It was beautiful, terrible in its majesty. At the center was a great black dome, pulsing faintly like a slumbering heart. Zina gasped. The temple. The whales circled above the structure, their bodies moving in slow, solemn patterns. Molio leaned forward. This is it. The gate of the deep. But something felt off. The air grew colder. Zina's stone dimmed, then flickered. A low rumble echoed through the water, distant, yet close. The temple, beautiful and still, had just exhaled. And something inside it had heard them. The water around the canoe churned softly, forming spirals that pulled at the edges of the currents. Zina gripped the sides, her spiral stone glowing again, but this time in steady, pulsating waves that matched the rhythm of the dark dome below. Her breath caught in her throat. The gate of the deep was not just a temple. It was alive. Molio leaned over, whispering words in a forgotten tongue. The pendant around his neck flickered, and faint golden glyphs rose to the surface of the sea like breath from the deep. One by one, the whales responded with a low harmony that rippled through the bones of the world. Their song moved the water, forming a glowing path spiraling down into the darkness. "We are being invited," Molio said, eyes shining with awe and fear. "But this is a test." Zina nodded. Her body trembled, not from cold but from something ancient pressing against her spirit. As if the sea itself were watching. Without hesitation, she stepped into the water. The moment she submerged, the world changed. Everything was quieter, slower. The ocean wrapped around her like a veil. As she descended alongside Molio, the glowing path lit up with their movement. Strange sea creatures, some beautiful, some monstrous, watched from the edges of the shadows but did not come close. Then they reached the temple floor. It was massive, with walls of deep coral and silver bone carved in symbols Zina somehow understood. At its center stood the gate, a great circular stone door, sealed tight with 7 spiral locks. Zina stepped forward, her hand drawn to one of the seals. As her fingers touched it, the lock lit up and turned. Something on the other side stirred, ancient, restless, waiting. The first seal had been broken. The spiral lock glowed a fierce blue before fading into the stone. A low hum vibrated through the ocean floor, and the gate pulsed once more, alive, aware. Zina stepped back, heart pounding. Molly grabbed her arm. That was the first seal. 6 remain. The gate responds to you, but we don't know if it opens to peace or destruction. The wails above sang louder now, circling in tighter patterns. Their tone was no longer coming. It was warning. Suddenly, the water around them trembled. From deep within the temple, a voice spoke, not with words, but through feeling. It pressed into Zina's mind like a tidal wave of memory. She saw flashes, a time when the sea teemed with harmony, when the keepers danced with whales under glowing reefs, then came betrayal and blood in the currents. A dark force, locked away. A promise made, only the voice of the echo may awaken the sealed. Zina gasped and clutched her spiral stone, which now burned against her skin. The temple had recognized her, but it had also shown her the cost. "We must leave," Molly said, eyes wide. "We are not ready." But before they could ascend, the gate paused again, and a swirling current shot out like a whisper made of water and light. It wrapped around Zina, lifting her gently into the water, turning her slowly, examining her. Her eyes glowed with pale silver as her mind connected, briefly, with the entity sealed beyond the gate. A whisper echoed inside her soul. "You have come early, but you have come. Shall I open?" "No." Zina cried out loud, breaking free. The current vanished. She and Molly rose quickly, lungs burning, reaching the surface as the whales parted to make way. Gasping, Zina turned to the sea. Something had seen her, and now it waited. Zina and Molly broke the surface, coughing and gasping under the wide night sky. The stars blinked above as though they, too, had seen what lay below. The whales had grown restless, no longer circling serenely, but moving in jagged patterns. One let out a sharp cry, a piercing sound unlike their usual harmonies. It shook the air and churned the sea. "They felt it," Molly said, eyes scanning the waves. Something stirred. Something ancient. Zina gripped the side of the canoe, still dazed. The voice in her mind lingered like salt on her tongue. It hadn't sounded evil, just hungry. Curious. Alone. But loneliness could be dangerous when left in the dark for too long. "We shouldn't have touched the seal," she whispered. "We had to." "You had to," Molly replied. "Now we know the gate responds to you. But we must be careful. If we awaken all 7 seals before we understand what lies behind them, we may not be able to stop what comes." They began paddling away from the temple's resting place. But as they moved, the water beneath them shifted, ripples forming in perfect circles. Something was following. Suddenly, a great dark shape moved beneath the canoe. Larger than any whale. Its shadow stretched wide across the sea floor, deeper and darker than anything they'd seen before. Even the whales stopped singing. Then, it was gone, vanishing into the deep like a whisper swallowed by silence. Zina turned to Molly. "Was that "I don't know," he said, voice tight. But it didn't come from above the gate. It came from below it. That night, they didn't rest. And far beneath the temple, behind the first open seal, an ancient eye blinked for the first time in 1,000 years. By dawn, the sea no longer shimmered with the familiar calm of the day before. It hissed and groaned, as if awakening from centuries of sleep. Strange fogs drifted across the water's surface, and the colors of the ocean had shifted, once blue and warm, now tinged with a silvery green hue that whispered of the unknown. Zina watched as fish leapt from the water without reason, their bodies shimmering unnaturally before diving back under. The whales swam closer to the canoe, protective, but quieter. Their songs were shorter now, broken, almost anxious. "I don't understand," Zina murmured. "Why is everything different?" Molio looked grim. The seal wasn't just a door. It was part of a balance. The creatures of the sea can feel the shift. Something that has been buried deep is now closer to the surface than it should be. Suddenly, a massive wave rose in the distance, high and unnatural, only to collapse back into itself without touching the canoe. The water beneath them throbbed like a heartbeat. The spiral stone against Zina's chest paused in rhythm, but it was out of sync with the whales now. The harmony was broken. "Listen," Malio whispered. They strained their ears. From far below, they could hear it, a murmur. A constant low sound, like 1,000 voices speaking in forgotten tongues. It wasn't whale song. It was older, colder. It came from beneath the gate. "The deep ones," Molio said. "The keepers used to say that if the gate ever cracked, they would begin to stir. They are not spirits. They are not gods. They are memories of the sea itself, twisted and waiting." Zina's eyes widened. And then she heard it clearly. Her own name echoing in that voice from the deep. Zina's heart pounded as her name echoed once more through the depths, Zinoa. The sound was haunting, pulled from the seabed like a forgotten prayer. It wasn't a whisper or a shout, it was a knowing, a deep resonance that recognized her not as a visitor, but as one of its own. Molio gripped his pendant tightly, his face pale. "We've been marked," he said. "The sea now knows your name. It will watch your every step." The whales encircled the canoe again, forming a barrier between the humans and whatever stirred below. Their song changed, no longer melodic but warning, sharp and pulsing. Even the sky seemed uneasy, clouds gathered despite no wind, casting strange shadows on the ocean surface. Suddenly, the water ahead darkened. A patch of sea turned black and still, unnaturally still. No waves, no sound. The spiral stone around Zina's neck began to tremble violently. She looked to Molio. "There's something there." Cautiously, they rowed closer. In the stillness, a figure rose from the water, tall, shrouded in a robe made of seaweed and scales, with no face, only a swirling spiral where a face should be. The water around it did not ripple. It floated, silent, yet aware. Zina stood. The spiral on her forehead glowed as the being lifted its hand. "Who keeps the old promise?" the voice echoed in her mind. Zina's lips parted. I do." The being pointed toward the horizon, where a current of dark water was forming. Then faced the first memory, it intoned. "Let the sea decide if you are worthy." Before she could speak again, the figure dissolved into water, and a whirlpool opened before them. Zina turned to Molly, her voice steady despite the fear. "We go in." And they did. The canoe was pulled into the swirling current, the water spinning faster than any natural whirlpool. Zina clutched the sides as the sky twisted above and the sea yanked them downward into a tunnel of churning darkness. There was no time to think, only to feel. The spiral stone burned against her chest, and then silence. Zina opened her eyes. She was no longer in the canoe. She stood ankle-deep in water, beneath a sky made of swirling clouds and stardust. The sea was calm, too calm, stretching out endlessly. Molly was gone. The whales were gone. Only she remained in a place that pulsed with forgotten magic. Before her rose a massive stone wall, ancient and cracked, covered in carvings of whales, spirals, and storm waves. It was the wall of the gate, but different, alive with memory. A voice drifted across the air. "This is the first memory, the drowning of trust." Images appeared on the wall, glowing like embers. Zina watched as a young girl, one that looked strikingly like herself, stood surrounded by people in white robes. They chanted, raised their hands to the sea, and a great beast emerged from the water. Not a whale, but something older, with eyes that held galaxies. The people bowed. But one of them, cloaked in envy, turned his back. He poisoned the water with dark stone. He wanted to command the sea, not serve it. The bond between the keepers and the whales shattered. Zina gasped. The betrayal was real. It wasn't just legend, it was echoing. She felt the sorrow of the whales, the rage of the sea. And then a voice whispered beside her ear. "Will you choose trust even when betrayal returns?" She turned to see nothing but her own reflection in the water. The test had begun. Zina stared into the water at her reflection, but something was wrong. Her eyes, usually soft and curious, were now sharp, cold, filled with secrets. As she blinked, the reflection changed. The image showed her standing at the edge of Okun-Maji, hands raised to the sea, and the ocean itself rising in response, violent and unforgiving. "No," she whispered. "That's not me." But the voice from before returned, echoing all around her. All who carry the echo carry the power to bind or break. Will you trust yourself when the sea does not? The water rippled. The vision vanished. Suddenly, a figure appeared behind her, tall, hooded in shimmering robes of black and silver. It was the same betrayer from the first memory. He moved with elegance, his step silent over the water surface. His face remained hidden, but Zina felt his presence deep in her chest, like a memory she hadn't lived, yet somehow knew. "You saw the moment of our fall," he said. "I, too, was once chosen. But the sea does not forgive easily." "Why did you do it?" Zina asked, voice shaking. He lifted a hand. "Because I feared the sea more than I trusted it. I wanted to protect us all from the unknowable, from what sleeps behind the gate." Zina took a step back. "But your fear poisoned the bond. The whales, the temple, they all suffered." He turned to her, and for the first time, she saw his eyes, glowing spirals of regret. "And now, you must answer the same question I failed. Will you trust the sea even when it shows you darkness?" Before she could answer, the scene began to collapse. The memory ended. She fell, this time upward, toward light. Zina burst from the water with a loud gasp, dragging in air like it was her first breath. The ocean stretched around her once more, real, steady, yet changed. The sky was darker than before, tinged with violet and streaks of gold. She thrashed for a moment before strong arms grabbed her. "Zina!" Molio shouted, pulling her toward the canoe. "You were gone. You vanished." She clung to him, heart pounding, eyes wide with wonder and confusion. "I saw it," she whispered. "The first memory. The betrayal. The fear. The question." He steadied her. "Did you pass the test?" She nodded slowly. "I didn't answer out loud, but I felt it. I chose trust, even in the face of fear." The whales returned then, circling them once more, their song quieter now, calmer. Zina's spiral stone pulsed gently, no longer burning. Above them, the clouds slowly began to part, revealing stars that shimmered like distant eyes watching. "It let you go," Molio said in awe. "The memory accepted your answer." Zina looked down at her hand. Etched across her palm now was a new symbol, a tiny crescent wave. Not carved, but born into her skin. "One test done," she whispered. 6 to go. Suddenly, a pod of whales dove beneath the canoe, pulling a current with them. The canoe shifted, gliding forward on its own, no paddling needed. "They are guiding us," Molio murmured. "To the next seal." Zina turned to the horizon, where a faint light pulsed in rhythm with her stone. "Then we follow." But beneath the waves, hidden far below, the gate paused again. And in the deepest part of the temple, the second seal began to tremble. The sea had accepted Zina's answer. Now it would reveal another question. The canoe glided swiftly across the water, guided by the movement of the whales. No paddles, no wind, only a current shaped by ancient magic and a force that pulsed with purpose. Zina sat quietly at the front, the spiral stone resting against her heart. Each beat of it echoed with direction, pulling her toward the unknown. Molio, now more alert than ever, traced symbols in the air with his fingers. "The next seal is near," he said. It's called Okun-Maji, the seal of echoes. It guards the memory of choice. Few have reached it. Zina turned to him, her voice calm. What do I need to do? He looked at her with both awe and sorrow. Listen, and remember. Soon, the water turned still, glassy, as if the sea itself were holding its breath. Beneath them, the whales stopped swimming. One let out a soft, mournful tone, low and long. Then, from the depths, a strange formation rose. It wasn't coral or stone. It looked like a massive shell, shaped like a conch, cracked along its ridges and glowing from within. As it surfaced, the spiral stone around Zina's neck lit up, and the crescent mark on her palm tingled. She reached out without hesitation and placed her hand against the glowing shell. The world twisted. She was pulled again, this time not into darkness, but into sound. Voices, millions, echoed around her, decisions made, paths taken, regrets, triumphs. It was overwhelming. Her own voice was there, too, whispering different versions of herself, Zina the fearful, Zina the proud, Zina the selfish. Which one is you? A voice asked from all directions. Which choice defines your truth? She opened her mouth to answer, and was swallowed by the sea of echoes. The sea of echoes was not water, but memory made liquid. Zina floated through it as if suspended in a dream, surrounded by shifting forms of herself. Each version glowed with different colors, different choices. One Zina wore fine robes and stood atop a throne, her expression proud and cold. Another knelt by the sea, weeping beside a broken whale, face streaked with ash. Another still wore war paint and held a burning torch, her eyes wild with vengeance. They all turned to look at her. Which one of us is the real you? The voices chorused in perfect unison. Zina's breath caught. I don't know. The proud Zina stepped forward. You could rule the waves, command the ocean. Isn't that what the echo is for? The weeping Zina rose slowly. But at what cost? The sea is not a weapon, it is a song. One we are meant to protect, not control. The vengeful Zina snarled. Protect? From what? From the same forces that betrayed the first whisperers. We should strike first, before we are swallowed again. Zina clutched her spiral stone. The voices were inside her now, tempting, warning, pleading. Her heartbeat became a drum, steady and deep. I'm all of you, she finally said. But I choose the part of me that listens, that trusts, that seeks balance. A silence followed, then a soft hum, like the first breath after a storm. The other Zinas began to fade, their expressions softening. The sea of echoes shifted, turning calm. The spiral stone around her neck glowed white, and her crescent palm mark shimmered like moonlight. The second seal accepted her. Zina opened her eyes to find herself back in the canoe, drenched in light, the whales singing in harmony once more. 2 seals broken. 5 to go. The moment Zina regained her senses, the ocean responded. A sudden gust of wind swept across the waves, and the clouds above scattered into a spiral, mirroring the mark on her palm. The whales beneath her leapt joyously, their bodies slicing through the air with weightless grace. Their song had changed again. This one sounded like celebration. Malio watched in awe. You've passed the second trial. The sea welcomes you. But Zina's eyes didn't reflect joy. Instead, she stared at the horizon, where a strange shimmer wavered, a ripple in the fabric of the sky. Something was coming. Something fast. Moments later, the ocean stirred unnaturally, parting like it had when they first saw the gate. But this time, no memory or ancient spirit emerged. Instead, a figure soared across the surface of the water, skimming atop a silver mantle as wide as a canoe. Cloaked in flowing robes and adorned in scales and pearls, the rider glowed faintly with bioluminescence. Their face was obscured by a mask carved in the shape of a whale's eye. The whales stopped singing. The manta rider hovered beside the canoe, silent. Zina stood slowly. "Who are you?" The rider raised a long, conch-shaped staff. "I am Oluma, tide herald of the deep accord," came the voice, neither male nor female, but resonant, layered like many voices at once. "You have awakened what sleeps beneath. The balance trembles. The third seal must not be broken yet. The sea is not ready." Zina's heart pounded. "I didn't come to destroy the balance. Yet every step you take shakes it," Oluma replied. "The gate remembers betrayal. The deep ones are stirring. And not all whales serve the light." With that, Oluma raised their staff and pointed toward the southern trench. "Beware the rift of teeth. It guards the next seal, and it does not forgive trespassers." Then they vanished into mist. The southern waters grew darker as the canoe drifted toward the place Oluma had named the Rift of Teeth. Even the sunlight struggled to pierce the depths here. The waves moved slower, as if the sea itself were reluctant to tread near. The whales that had once guided Zina now kept their distance, circling at the edges of the current. Their song had gone quiet, replaced by tense silence. Zina gripped the spiral stone. It no longer paused, it trembled. Malio peered into the water. "This place, it's not just deep. It's ancient, untouched, forgotten." Below them, the ocean floor cracked open into a jagged trench, its sides sharp like fangs. Massive rock spires jutted upward, encrusted with barnacles and eerie green moss. The water shifted uneasily. Something was awake down there, something watching. "This is where the third seal sleeps," Zina said softly. "I can feel it." As the canoe hovered over the rift, a sharp click echoed from below. Then another. Then dozens. The sounds bounced off the trench walls like bone tapping bone. Malio stiffened. "Those aren't echoes. They are hunters." Before Zina could speak, the water beneath them exploded. A sleek creature shot upward, black-scaled, eel-like, with a glowing spine and a mouth lined with spiral teeth. It was followed by another, then another. The rift was full of them, guardians of the third seal. Zina raised her hand instinctively, and her palm glowed. The creatures froze mid-motion, hissing. A low rumble followed, deep and primal. From within the trench, a massive eye blinked open, yellow, slit-pupiled, and ancient. Zina whispered, "It's not just the seal that's down there. It's something older." Molly looked at her in alarm. "We are not alone in the deep." And the rift of teeth was ready to test their right to pass. Zina and Molly barely had time to react as the water churned violently around them. The eel-like guardians formed a circling wall beneath the canoe, their glowing spans illuminating the rift impulses. Each beat cast eerie shadows, revealing jagged coral statues, once human forms fossilized in fear, forever watching. Zina gripped her spiral stone. It glowed in response, flickering like a beacon. "We have to go down," she said. Molly looked at her like she'd gone mad. "Into that?" She nodded. "The third seal is calling. If we don't pass the test, it won't open. And if it doesn't open willingly," he sighed, "the rift might force it open anyway." They dove together. The water was ice cold and heavy with pressure. As they descended, the eel creatures swam around them like sentinels, their glowing eyes never blinking. A sharp cry echoed from below, a warning, a challenge, or both. Then they saw it. The third seal. Embedded into the wall of the trench was a massive circular glyph, formed from fossilized bones, coral, and teeth. Spirals of dark green kelp waved around it like tendrils, pulsing with energy. Zina reached out, but the guardian lunged forward with lightning speed. She didn't flinch. Instead, she sang. Not a human song, but a whale's song, the one she had heard as a child. Pure, trembling, ancient. The creature stopped mid-lunge, eyes softening. The others slowed too. Then the seal began to glow. But it didn't open. Instead, a voice surged into Zina's mind, stronger than any before. "To pass, you must give what cannot be taken." She floated still, confused. Molly whispered, "What do you give that cannot be taken?" Zina's heart sank. The answer was simple and painful. "Trust." Zina floated before the third seal, the voice of the rift echoing in her bones. "To pass, you must give what cannot be taken." The kelp around the seal moved like fingers, waiting, testing. The eel guardians swam in slow circles, no longer hostile but watchful, judging. "Trust," she whispered, the word echoing strangely in the water. "But how do I give it?" Molly swam beside her. "Not to the sea. To something within it." He looked at the eel creatures. "They are waiting for you to surrender." Zina closed her eyes. All her life, she had trusted the sea, the whales, the voices, the memories. But this was different. This time, the sea was asking her to trust not just it, but its monsters. Slowly, she reached for the spiral stone at her neck. It had always been her guide, her anchor. She wrapped her fingers around it and let go. The stone drifted downward. Immediately, the seal lit up, the glowing kelp pulling gently toward it. The eels surged forward, but not in attack. One of them caught the stone in its mouth and dove into the trench. Zina watched, her heart tight. She had no weapons, no talismans. She had given up her power. The kelp parted. The seal opened. It paused once, then split into a spiral, revealing a glowing chamber behind it. Within, a flickering vision appeared, whales swimming freely in a luminous sea, untouched by human greed or fear. Peace. Harmony. A memory of what once was. You are worthy, the voice whispered. You gave without knowing what would return. Zina felt warmth spread through her body. The crescent mark on her palm deepened, and another spiral etched itself onto her shoulder. 3 seals broken. But the sea would not let her celebrate for long. The rift began to shake. The trench shuddered like a beast disturbed in its sleep. The glowing chamber behind the open seal trembled, and the light began to dim. Zina grabbed Molly's arm. We need to go. Now. The eel guardians shrieked in unison and scattered, vanishing into cracks along the walls. Even the coral statues trembled, as though the memories trapped in them wanted to escape. A deep rumble rolled up from the bottom of the rift, a sound Zina felt more than heard. It rattled her ribs, reached into her spine. What's happening? She asked, kicking upward. Molly looked pale. We've disturbed something beneath the seals. I thought they were gates for memory, but maybe they are also locks. Locks keeping something in. As they ascended, the water beneath them boiled with rising bubbles. Cracks spread along the trench floor like lightning bolts. And then, they saw it. A massive tendril. It slithered out from one of the trench's deepest fissures, covered in glowing glyphs, its skin like oil on water. It didn't chase them, it simply reached, testing the space, brushing against the walls of the ancient prison. Behind it, a pair of massive golden eyes opened, far larger than any creature Zina had ever seen. And then, it smiled. Not with a mouth, but with knowing. They broke the surface in a burst, gasping for breath as the canoe rocked violently beneath them. The whales were already there, crying out, circling fast, their tones filled with panic. Zina turned to the horizon. Thunderclouds were forming unnaturally fast. Lightning danced across the sea. The third seal was a warning, she said, voice trembling. We are not just unlocking memories anymore. Molly nodded grimly. We are waking something that remembers everything. And it had just opened its eyes. The sky tore open with a scream of lightning. Zina and Molly huddled in the canoe as waves rose high and crashed like war drums. The whales formed a protective ring around them, singing in low, resonant pulses that calmed the raging tide, but only barely. The sea was angry, confused, awake. And something old beneath it was stretching limbs long asleep. Zina gripped the canoe's edge. Her spiral stone was gone, but the mark on her shoulder burned brighter now, alive with energy. The seals weren't just gates, she said. They were guardians. Each one weakened the prison. Molly nodded grimly. 3 broken, 4 remain. But I don't think we'll reach the 4th. A massive shape surfaced in the distance, larger than any whale. Its back was like a mountain of coral and scars, and its tendrils shimmered with glowing runes. The creature from the trench had emerged. It was no beast. It was a god-forgotten memory, a remnant of a time before the oceans were tame. Then, to their astonishment, it spoke, not aloud, but into their minds. Child of the echo, you have opened the path. Come and finish what was started. Zina's vision blurred. She saw flashes of a time when the sea ruled the world, when balance was kept not by humans or spirits, but by mutual trust. And then, she saw the fall, the betrayal, the locking away of the deep memory to protect the fragile world above. I was never meant to be free, the voice growled. But now you've remembered me. Zina stood tall. Then I'll choose what to remember next. She turned to Molly. We don't seal it again. We rewrite it. The sea stilled as Zina stood at the edge of the canoe, her palms glowing brighter than ever before. The storm raged around them, but the waves pulled back, making space. The ancient creature rose from the deep in full, a being of shadow and shimmering scales, with coral ridges across its spine and eyes older than time. It hovered above the water, towering, terrifying, yet mournful. You would rewrite what was written in stone, it asked, its voice now less of a growl and more a sorrowful echo. You would offer mercy, where those before gave chains. Zina raised her marked hand. I saw your memory. You were once a guardian. You protected balance before you were betrayed. The creature paused, and visions appeared in the sky, whales swimming alongside it in peace, the first keepers dancing on ocean cliffs, and then the spiral seal slamming shut as the world grew afraid. Molly stepped forward beside her. We feared what we couldn't understand. But fear is not the same as wisdom. Zina closed her eyes. Her voice rose, not in a scream, but in song. A new whale song. One never sung before. The whales responded instantly, harmonizing, lifting the melody into the sky. The storm began to die. The clouds unraveled. The sea turned glass smooth. And the creature changed. Its body folded inward, its glow softened. The spiral markings on its skin began to fade, turning to waves, symbols of choice, not punishment. With a great exhale, it sank back into the deep, but not in retreat. In peace. Zina's hand dimmed, but the mark on her shoulder shimmered, transforming into a flowing wave, alive, ever-moving. The gate was no longer a prison. It was now a door to harmony. The sun rose gently over the horizon, bathing the sea in golden warmth. The storm was gone. The trench had quieted. And for the first time in centuries, the ocean sang, not in mourning, not in warning, but in peace. Zina and Molly floated in silence as the whales circled them one last time. Their melodies were slower now, content. The deep had returned to rest. The third seal, though open, no longer throbbed with danger. It had become a wellspring of memory, not a warning of destruction. We didn't just stop the awakening, Zina whispered. We helped it remember itself. Molly smiled, tired but proud. You didn't rewrite history. You healed it. The canoe carried them gently back toward the distant shores of Okun-Maji. As they approached, the villagers waited, watching with awe. They had seen the sky change, heard the song of the whales, felt the storm break and the calm return. Mama Okun-Maji stepped forward with tears in her eyes. You brought balance, she said softly. The sea will never forget you, Zina. Zina smiled, stepping onto the sand, her bare feet leaving wet prints behind. The mark on her shoulder still shimmered, a reminder of all she had done and all she had become. The gate of the deep now slept, not as a prison, but as a guardian of memory. Zina would no longer be called the mysterious girl who communicated with whales. She was the echo bearer, the song weaver, the bridge between worlds. And every night, as the waves kissed the shore, Okun-Maji would hear the soft whisper of the sea. Not of fear, but of hope. And so, the sea was no longer silent. Thanks to a girl who listened and chose to trust. Zina's story reminds us, sometimes, the loudest power is the quietest voice. The one that listens. The one that loves. May we all be echo bearers in our own way. Hope you enjoyed this journey beneath the waves. Tell us your favorite moments in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell so you never miss another magical African tale. More stories of mystery, courage, and ancient wisdom are on the way. Until next time, listen closely. The ocean still whispers.